To me, its worth is so beneath me that I don't have a problem with that.
Wow. Okay. So I've heard that this guy ain't alright. So let's find out.
If I want a warrior, I'm going to feed them red meat. I want them to have the bloodlust necessary to kill someone. And that comes from hunting and eating red meat.
Do you need that?
So wait, if you're gonna feed someone, is that even a thing, that bloodlust shit? Or is it another piece of bullshit that people say? Yeah.
That bloodlust.
Yes.
So what do you need that bloodlust for? Maybe I'm a bit scared of you now.
No, engineering's competitive.
Hi Vladimir, it's a pleasure to meet you. Today I'm...
Oh, yeah. Well, look, football is competitive, so you should be out hunting and killing, so you have the bloodlust necessary to excel in your competition. Pro.
I'm at Texas A&M, and I have a banner that says, "Why aren't you vegan yet?" And you've very kindly been patiently waiting, and I'm really interested to know what your response to that question is.
Well, pretty simply, I'm not vegan because I believe that humans stand above all other animals.
Sure.
And thusly, we have a different moral...
I mean, even if you think humans stand above animals, like, how are they below a threshold whereby now it's justified to slit their throats? Like, I can look at a baby and think they have more value than, like, an old person. Does that suddenly mean now I can stab the old people because I value the baby more? No?
And, like, individual worth compared to everything else.
I'll get into that in just a moment, because I think it's a really interesting statement. I want to know how you came to that view.
Well, I come from a Christian background, first off.
Yeah.
And in Genesis, it establishes that we have dominion over the earth.
Yeah.
Does that mean that we can exploit it, kill it, destroy it, if we have dominion over it? What?
Also, it's a matter of consciousness and intelligence.
Sure.
I look in a mirror, I know who I am. Mm-hmm. It's like I am who I am.
There are other animals that can pass the mirror test. And why does an individual need to know who they are? Like, I mean, do people really know who they are? I don't know. Like, you probably think that you're coming across as like a good or nice person, but this I'm not seeing it right now. I'm struggling to see it. But yeah, why does someone have to be able to do that in order for you not to think stabbing them would be an alright idea?
I am kind of thing. Whereas I don't think animals have that trait.
Not all animals. Yeah, not all animals, I'm sure. So what we've done, and the reason I asked you that second question was I just wanted to establish if it was maybe like a religious belief or if there was something else. But it seems to stem from intelligence and kind of cognition seems to be the primary reasons for that, and that makes sense to me. Because what we do have is kind of like a scale, and as you probably heard from my previous conversation, I was using words like sentience and consciousness to describe animals. And so whilst I use those words to describe animals, that doesn't mean that there isn't a differentiation between animals. You know, humans, like I said, with the previous person being kind of at the top of this intelligence scale. And then you probably come down, you have like whales, dolphins, primates, and then you probably have like pigs and cows and such. And you
yeah, this guy is someone who watches too much Liver King.
Coming down. And so I think that's an absolutely fair ladder to create. And the reason I say that is because let's say that you're faced with a hypothetical scenario where you're in a burning building. And in that burning building, there's a human and there is a chicken. And you can only save one of those lives. Well, of course, you know, there's many reasons why you're going to save the human life over the chicken. And that would be a morally justified thing to do. But let's say...
Yeah, blind people can't pass the mirror test. Do they suddenly, like, lack value because they can't see themselves? Like, in that way? Like, what the hell?
Let's use the same burning building. But now inside that burning building, you have a 5-year-old human child and you have a 95-year-old human. Now, there's probably a number of reasons why you'd save the 5-year-old human child over the 95-year-old human. But that wouldn't mean that you were arbitrarily allowed just to harm elderly people in society because
Precisely,
in
Jesus.
an extreme situation you could find a moral reason to save the child over the elderly person. I think the same is true of animals. You can create a difference between them, and you can say, if I had to choose, I would choose the human life because of the criteria that you've used, the intelligence, the advanced cognition, those factors. But we're not faced with that either-or situation. We're faced with three choices. Killing humans, pretty obvious, right? Killing animals, or killing neither. And so I think, and I'm interested to know if you agree or not, but I think that it doesn't really matter if we place humans at the top, because human superiority intellectually doesn't mean that we should just arbitrarily harm animals when we have another option which can reduce the suffering that we cause to animals as well. What do you think about what I just said?
If you're drawing that ladder, why is it wrong that us at the top of the food chain don't act like a shark or a bear or any other animal that's at the top of their respective food chain and is responsible for culling the populations of the herbivores?
I think it comes down to the same criteria that you use to assign humans extra value, intelligence. It's a cheesy line from Spider-Man, the Tobey Maguire one's the good ones. And Uncle Ben says, with great power comes great responsibility, right? And I think that's a really good line, because what I think we have is undeniably power. Firstly, dominion is a word that you used, and we do have dominion because we have the intellectual and physical capabilities to do whatever we want. But with power, you have two real options, don't you? You could be kind of tyrannical with that power, or you could kind of be more nurturing with that power. It's the same with parents, right? Parents obviously have dominion over their children, but dominion doesn't give the right to harm. It creates a sense of responsibility to nurture.
Yeah, that's so weird.
And that doesn't mean that we have to do anything extreme with animals. It just means not going out of our way to kind of arbitrarily cause them suffering. So what separates us from, say, sharks or bears or lions is that they don't possess the moral agency that we do. They don't possess the intelligence to be able to rationalize their decisions. So for us, humans,
I just don't get how we can separate ourselves and say, oh yeah, but we're better, we're different, we're able to do these things, we're able to rationalize and use cognition, and then we don't fucking use it. Doesn't make any sense. We're no better then, are we? No, we're not. That's great.
We have not only the intelligence, but we also have the options in front of us. A lion kills a gazelle, well, firstly because they have to, and secondly, they probably aren't able to empathize with the gazelle in the same way that we can with our increased intelligence, empathize with the animals who we consume and kill. So let's take this scale again. We've got humans at the top, we've got animals, and then at the bottom of that, we have plants. So I agree with you that we can create this kind of moral worth here, but that's what leads us to veganism. Because if our aim is to cause, reduce suffering, and our aim is to kind of, consume living beings that are beneath us on that chain, then consuming the plants causes less suffering than consuming the animals. And so that's why I draw this conclusion of veganism, because when we talk about sentience and intelligence, they come below animals, non-human animals as well. Does that make sense? What do you think?
Yes, but I don't necessarily completely follow with the absolute reduction of suffering.
Not the absolute reduction. We can't absolutely reduce it.
Yes, but the gap between human and animal suffering to me is just as big as the gap between animal and plant suffering.
Oh no, he's not doing that.
It's almost they live almost entirely based off of instinct. And yes, I
what? So then they don't tremendously suffer. We can measure the emotional intelligence of some of the animals that we've actually you looked into. For example, cows. Look up the psychology of cows, and they have the ability to, as far as we're aware, deeply feel emotion. Arguably, there could be some animals that are capable of even more emotion than we are. This doesn't make any sense.
I clearly don't think that it's okay to tie up dogs and have their faces be eaten off by mice.
This is what I don't understand. I don't understand how we could see, they're of so little value that it doesn't matter if we kill them. But obviously it would cause them a great deal of suffering to just kind of pin them to a wall and do all these things to them. Either they are going to be capable of having a negative experience that we could avoid doing, or they really just, it doesn't really matter too much what you do to them. It's basically a plant and that kind of distance, so we could just kind of stab them and it wouldn't matter. In fact, let's just prolong the suffering, gas them slower, slit their throats slower, maybe, I don't know, do a water torture on them before you kill them. Like, these things shouldn't really matter if they're of so little value that taking away their lives from them is absolutely fine. It doesn't matter, they're so beneath us, we have dominion over them anyway. Then why would it really matter what we do with them?
Rights or whatever, like true acts of cruelty.
It doesn't matter, like with a plant, because they don't have sentience. It doesn't matter if I stab them. It doesn't matter if I rip off their leaves. These things don't matter. If I deroot them, if I do it slowly, these things aren't considerations because they aren't a subject with the capability to experience and suffer. So I don't understand, like, which one is it?
But I am okay with, I am eating this steak. I acknowledge that the animal died and possibly suffered.
I bet they're thankful for your acknowledgement.
For me to eat this steak.
Yeah.
To me, its worth is so beneath me that I don't have a problem with that.
Wow. I'd keep a watchful eye on this one. Then why would it matter? Like, shouldn't we be able to chain them up and slowly torture them? Like leave them there for years and years, just slowly dying? Like, why do you even need to acknowledge it if they're so beneath you? Like, God. All right, vegans are the fucking crazy ones, but when someone comes along and says this, nah, it's all right. Just is what it is, isn't it? Like, let them be happy. Let them do what they want to do. All right, okay.
So, just to go back to the first thing you said in that conversation, you said that the gap between humans and animals is kind of the same or whatever compared to the gap between plants and animals. Forget about the human and animal gap. The important thing is the animal to plant gap. That's what's important. As soon as we establish that morally there is a difference between cutting the stalk of a broccoli and cutting the throat of a pig, we've created that there is a moral distinction between those two acts. So do you agree or disagree that morally there is a distinction between cutting the stalk of a broccoli and cutting the throat of a pig?
No.
Okay, then why does it matter whether or not you slowly kill them? You fucking ding dong.
If both are for food, then no.
Why would it? Like, what the fuck? Fundamentally, what would the purpose really matter to, like, the suffering that they're going to experience? Either it's bad or not. Especially when, like, you could get the food elsewhere. Shit. Oh my god.
The difference I would draw is if you're cutting the throat of a pig, you're ending its life.
Yeah.
Briefly, quickly, efficiently.
Yeah.
For food. If you are slowly torturing an animal, my problem isn't necessarily with the animal being tortured. It's more so with what the person torturing it exhibits that I feel could be reflected if they ever got the power to do that to a human.
Oh my god, he cares that little about other species that it doesn't even matter about their suffering. No, it's about what that says about a person who's willing to stab an animal, what they would potentially do to a human. Are you not hearing yourself? Yikes. Who gave you the audacity, by the way?
Sure. And I understand what you're saying. So by that kind of like implication, are you saying that non-human animals don't deserve moral consideration?
Possibly.
Sure.
Yikes.
But there's a
I'm fucking crazy. I sound like a dickhead. Yeah.
contradiction there, because if non-human animals don't deserve moral consideration, then dogs having their faces eaten alive with mites or whatever it was, that experiment that we're alluding to, that doesn't become a moral concern anymore because they don't deserve moral consideration. If there's no difference between cutting the stalk of a broccoli and cutting a pig's throat, then me boiling a cauliflower in the pan is no different to me boiling a dog in a pan. If that's the similarity you want to draw, then morally there's no difference between any of those. But you yourself, by the admission that there are some things that we can't do or shouldn't do to an animal, have already assigned moral worth to those animals.
I think, yes, we do attribute a little bit moral worth to animals, especially when looking at acts of cruelty, because we think, well, what if that was a person? And actually, one of my favorite...
Well, no, we don't see it as cruel to do for someone to stab a plant. You know what I mean? Because, what if that was a person? What if that were a human that they were stabbing? Oh my god. No, it's because we understand they are a subject with the capacity to suffer. like, of course, what might come into it is the empathy of like, oh my God, like if that were me, that would be horrible. But Jesus Christ, we understand the distinction that they too have the capacity to suffer, and that would be a bad experience for them. Like, what the fuck? It's not coming from, oh, what if they did that to me? Because when someone punches a table, stabs a fucking plant, it's not like, oh my God, like, oh, like what if that were human though? Like, that's really bad. Like, oh. No, it's a fucking table. It's not a subject.
I'm a big anime manga fan. Is The Promised Neverland.
I'm familiar with it. I've not seen it, but I'm familiar.
I'd say it probably has a fairly strong vegan message.
Explain it to me.
Humans are essentially raised by alien races in these farms for consumption.
Sure.
Now there are distinctions, and you follow the like high quality, because they eat us for our brains. You follow the high quality meat, which are nurtured in a home until they're eventually sent off and then quickly killed.
Right.
And then others are kind of
What was that called?
factory farmed.
Sure.
In those cases, the humans are conscious. The humans try to escape. They have moral value, I would say, because of their intelligence.
What aspects of their what aspects?
Well, no, because they're not going to be at the same level of intelligence. I don't understand. Like, it's the consciousness, it's the awareness, and being able to like actually experience like what it would be like to have your throat slit. Woo.
Their intelligence, because I what's interesting, and it does sound like it's got a little bit of a coded vegan message in there. I thought that was what one you were alluding to was about. You're assigning kind of like these humans in this fictional scenario moral worth.
And it's funny as well, right? Because these aliens probably think that they are more superior and have dominion over them, right? Has anyone watched it? It sounds like something. It's like, oh, well, the humans, they aren't as intelligent as us. We have the power over them. That might makes right. Like,
based on their intelligence, and you kind of said, they try to escape. Well, I mean, many of the animals who we farm try to escape as well. They don't necessarily have the means to be able to, although some do achieve it. Often they're either shot by police or brought back to the slaughterhouse anyway. But they do still try to escape.
yeah, I mean, I was at a vigil on Saturday. I've got some footage from that I need to take from my camera. That's going to be great to relive. And the animals are flailing around. They don't want to be in that small confined space. Like, even though they don't know what's going on, they want to get out of there. They're bellowing, they're crying. They are not comfortable. And even if they weren't aware of what's going on because they don't have the knowledge, I don't know why that would make it okay.
So, again, whilst we may say that there is intelligence difference, it's not really the differences that matter. It's about the intelligence that these animals have, and the fact that they can suffer and they can feel pain and they do experience these emotions and feelings. So you use the word cruelty, and so I want to just establish, when you say animal cruelty, how are you defining the word cruelty in that scenario?
Malice on the side of the human that is conducting it, because...
But how can you be malicious to an individual unless they're a subject? Like, how can you be malicious truly to a table? Am I being malicious when I'm doing that to the table? Like, am I really?
I don't see a lion brutally tearing apart a gazelle as cruelty, but I would see a human doing a similar act maliciously as cruelty, because once again, as we've established, humans have agency, animals don't necessarily have the same level of agency.
Yeah. So, interestingly, you had initially kind of said about, well, other animals do this, so what's the difference? We now have kind of gone past that, and you seem to agree that that doesn't create the distinction, but now you're kind of using that distinction as an alternative justification. So if we accept that we have these differences and we have the moral agency, and whilst I agree that it's unpleasant to watch a lion tear down a gazelle, it's not necessarily fun viewing, but we don't feel morally repulsed by it because of the lack of agency and the necessity that the lion has to do so. But when we see a human doing it, why is it that we then think that that is morally wrong then?
The moral wrongness comes from intent, I think, with humans, because we can have motive. And motive does matter. Like, if a human kills another human, why was that done?
Yes.
And that's why we have degrees of murder.
Absolutely.
You have, passionate, you found your wife with another man and shot.
Yeah, it does matter, but fundamentally, it'd still be, I mean, there are probably cases where you could say, okay, well, that was, like, justified. But in most instances, that's going to be bad. Like, no matter what the intention was. Do you know what I mean?
Them both, not, I wouldn't say that's morally right,
No.
but that's definitely different than you slowly plan out a death, or you capture, torture, rape, then kill someone.
There are gradients.
Yes. We also...
But if we put that into the context of what we do to animals, no matter what, we would be, with the intention, we would be to kill them, to use them. So no matter what, we're doing something bad, because we could have absolutely avoided doing so. They weren't like attacking us. We bred them into existence to use them, so exploit them, because it's against their, against their best interests to be used in such a way and then killed. And then we're going to commodify them. That, no matter what, is going to be bad. So even when understanding that intent does matter, the intention will always be bad in that case.
So morally judge those not by just what is done, but why it was done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he did just
Person
describe farming.
kills
This
an
is funny. He literally, that is the point. He just described farming.
Animal for food. They did it for an expressed purpose, and I do think some of the ways that we waste animals is disgusting, and
That's disgusting, but breeding them into existence with the purpose of exploiting, killing them, and commodifying them, no.
there's definitely problems that could be improved upon without taking the whole system apart.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I hear you. I hear exactly what you're saying. Okay, so the reason why a human doing this to an animal would be down to the motive. Absolutely right. It's just, as you say, very rightly, it's the same with humans. If you shot a human out of self-defense, that act is very different to walking up to a human and just shooting them, undeniably. So motive plays a huge part. And so someone who is just, let's just say, gratuitously harming an animal in front of us just for the pleasure of harm would be concerning to us because of the human and their psychology and what they were capable of. Whilst a human who buys meat in a supermarket, we wouldn't necessarily question their mental health because they're partaking in an action that seems, culturally normalized and doesn't seem like a moral concern to many people, so we wouldn't necessarily have the same fears about that person. So I hear you on that point, and that's a good point. But really what we have to boil it down to then is that idea of motive and intention. So whilst there are clearly discrepancies between those two motives, we have to boil down what the motive is for harming animals and killing them for food. So what is the intention behind that action? It's an obvious question, of course, but let's just start with that question.
The intent behind harming animals or killing them for food is for sustenance, for maintain. I mean, you are going to a cultural element, and yes, it is for maintaining our cultural norms and what we eat, and like what nutrients we choose to take in. But I don't believe that norm is a fully. I think that norm is good, and I think that what we do need in our culture. I understand that from a vegan perspective, this compromise probably couldn't exist, but I would like to see those of us who enjoy meat, like we do it knowingly, and we do it with respect.
Yeah, I mean, if you do it knowingly, then absolutely. And I don't know how you respectfully exploit individuals, commodify them, and kill them.
I know I'm eating the steak. I respect the fact that this animal lived and died for me. I mean, like the natives, the Japanese, a ton of cultures.
What the actual hell? Beads of rage.
There's a few points in there, so you'll have to bear with me. I'm going to try and make sure I hit all of them. The word extreme is an interesting word to use to assign to veganism, because I think that not harming someone unnecessarily is not extreme. I think killing someone even though we don't have to would be my version of extreme. But anyway, past the semantics of the word. Okay, so the first thing I want to establish is the motive, the intention behind why we kill animals for food. So we'll come back to that. And then because we talk about culture and stuff like that, which is obviously a very important consideration. And then we come down to that notion of respect. Okay, respect, for me, and maybe you'll disagree, so feel free to tell me if you do. But when I think of the word respect implies mutuality. If you came and sat down next to me and I just started shouting at you and I was like, you are this and that and this and that, and I'm vegan and I hate you. Do you know what I mean? Like, that would not be respectful. I also don't believe that either, just to clarify. But it also wouldn't be respectful. Even if I sat here and went, I am consciously and knowingly doing this, and I'm fine with that, that still wouldn't imply respect. Because respect is about a mutually kind of like agreed upon thing. It's about me understanding your feelings, your desires, your needs, your wants, and hopefully you reciprocating and doing the same. Hence what we're doing now, having a respectful conversation where we're vocalizing disagreements, but in a way that is very pleasant, really, and enjoyable, I find anyway. So that's respectful. But what we do to animals isn't respectful because this is one-sided, biased approach to respect. It says, I can do what I like and kill these animals even though I don't need to, but as long as I'm okay with that and I'm consciously doing that, then that's fine.
Yeah,
but consciously
that's
causing harm
so fucked up to another level. Like,
someone is potentially more disrespectful than unconsciously because you're knowingly inflicting that harm onto them. Okay, let's bring it back down to this intention again. obviously the intention of just gratuitously harming an animal in front of us for not food is wrong. And the reason we think it's wrong is because the intention behind it is just a kind of a selfishly motivated intention. So when it comes to food, we kind of separate the intention behind that into three important things. Firstly, sustenance, then nutrition, and I guess sustenance and nutrition are pretty much the same thing, and then kind of like culture. So the first thing we have to establish is whether or not we can get sustenance from elsewhere, which we can, of course. We can be plant-based and get sustenance and nutrients from being plant-based. And so that removes that kind of intention behind it, because now the intention isn't for sustenance because it's not a necessity anymore. It's an optional thing. So that's not the intention behind it anymore, or at least it's not a good enough intention. And then it becomes about culture. So the question then becomes, and feel free to disagree with anything I've said, of course, obviously culture does influence morality. There's no denying that it does. But should something be blindly accepted as moral simply because it's cultural?
I definitely think that there are elements within culture that you need to examine, whether it's moral, whether it's not moral. If I went to a nation of all vegans, or, fictional, plant-based only people, I would, as an outsider, have to respect that, because they have made that moral decision. I have a different moral.
So, if someone has a moral decision to, I don't know, stab people with blue eyes, you would be respecting them when you go over by doing the same thing? No?
Decision, since despite all your arguments, I still place humans where I do. So yeah, I think that's the case with cultural morality, and I also understand that we can get food from other sources. I'm Eastern Orthodox, and kind of like original offshoot from Catholics, whole church history thing. But we fast multiple times throughout the year with relative strictness of fast, and the reason why 40 days up to Lent or what have you, we stay away from dairy and meat and all these things is because they actually have a psychological effect. So when you eat meat, you are more prone to anger. When you eat dairy, you are and wrath. When you eat dairy, you're more prone to certain other sins. Right. And this isn't just a religious argument. Certain studies that have been connected, or that the church has looked at, have actually psychologically shown that different chemicals within that can modify behavior. Right. Okay. So if I want a warrior, because like it or not, our society needs them to a certain extent, I'm going to feed them red meat. I want them to have the bloodlust necessary to kill someone, and that comes from hunting and eating red meat.
Do you need that bloodlust?
Yes.
Apparently.
So what do you need that bloodlust for? I'm a bit scared of you now.
No, engineering's competitive. Life is competitive, and so when I choose to eat meat, I'm choosing to harness. I'm choosing to become a monster and then control that monster to become as productive in society as I can be.
It just feels a little bit insincere because we kind of established before that one of your fears about people harming animals gratuitously is that it would create more kind of negative traits in those humans. Outside of the consideration that non-human animals deserve. You were fearful that people who harm them would then have these kind of negative traits within them. But now you're kind of confirming that people who do eat meat, dairy, and eggs are taking these negative traits within them, which was precisely the fear that you had about people that were gratuitously harming animals. And so it seems like you've almost kind of created an alignment between those two concepts by the fact that both create a negative outcome for the humans involved in that as well.
Well, there's a difference of degree there, and I don't want to make the nuance argument because a lot of people that's stupid, but at least in my opinion. But there are bloodlust and like power are tools. So in relative moderation, where you're taking in certain things because of the traits you want to acquire, then you are using those tools to further yourself. Just killing an animal brutally, you're not necessarily feeding the power side of it, you're feeding malice. Right. And you're using your power for something that is dark and evil, right. At least in my opinion. Sure. Whereas if you're eating meat and you are, in a sense, I don't want to sound like some ancient hippie or whatever culture, but you take on the traits of an animal, right. You can use those traits to protect your family, to be a good husband, to be a good soldier. It's a level of degree and direction. Sure. Malice, cruelty towards animal, high degree of kind of taking a large power rush with malicious intent. Right. Eating a steak, a smaller incremental feeling of power, I guess.
It's just not feeling it. It's like, bro, you're talking bollocks. Did he smoke a doobie before this? Is that what this is?
But without the malicious direction. I hope that makes some sense.
It made about as much sense as a spoon with a hole in it, to be honest with you. Oh man. Wow.
Totally self-contradictory, but
I think potentially it's partly, and also it's a very abstract thing you're concerning yourself with, and there's no quantifiable data.
So he even knows it's self-contradictory, and the price that others have to pay for this self-contradictory worldview is immense. It's their entire existence. Wow.
Of course, to say that consuming a steak is going to increase your mental power. But just to bring it back to what we were saying, because I think I kind of think maybe we've gone off on an interesting tangent, but a tangent that I think is kind of a little bit not so quantifiable and a bit arbitrary maybe. So I'd like to bring it just back, and I'm just interested in establishing this kind of like chain of morality that you have again. Because I think that there was, and I'm going to use this word insincerity again, just to kind of like, okay, cool, appreciate that, thank you, Vladimir. So I'm going to use this word insincerity when it came to the difference between chopping a broccoli and cutting a pig's throat. Because, like I said before, you've established that gratuitous violence to an animal is wrong, which means that you do think that morally there's a difference between consuming plants and animals, because the things that we'd be against someone doing to an animal in front of us, we might be a bit like, what are they doing? But we wouldn't be so concerned if they were doing it to a broccoli or a cauliflower or a courgette or a zucchini, should I say, in front of us. So there is a moral distinction there that we have already ascertained. And so by creating that moral distinction between plants and animals, we've assigned a degree of moral worth to both of those different types of living organisms. And because we've created a difference between those two, morally speaking, I would believe that it's preferable to inflict harm on the living organisms that are least capable of feeling that harm. In other words, inflicting or choosing options that reduce suffering overall. Now, I suppose the question there would be, do you think that morally speaking, A, is that true? But also B, do you think that the reduction of suffering in situations where we have a choice side by side, the choice of reducing suffering is the morally preferable choice? What do you think about that two-parter?
I think it's in large part.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I thought like Spartans were on like freaking slop and stuff like plant slop. And yeah, the gladiators, barley. Yeah, I don't understand why it's like, oh yeah, the bloodlust. It's like, I don't get it. I don't get it. Some people believe some interesting things. I don't know. Barley-barians. Why does that sound cute though? Only shot in a barley-barian. That's what we're gonna do, okay? Right, Tofu King, I'm gonna steal your name. Okay? I'm gonna go up against Liver King. And I'm gonna say, unleash your inner barley-barian by being a salad. Oh yeah, here's my 9 Ancestral tenets, okay? But before everything else, you gotta eat pussy. Fucking hell, right. I've just stolen Liver King's model. Mine I think is much better. I mean, if that's what you eat, then that could lead to bloodlust as well, to be honest with you. It really depends on the context.
But yeah, it's economical. I'm not, in a way, I don't want to totally go back to the previous tangent, but yes, there is a moral distinction, but
I'm sorry for that vulgar behavior, by the way.
I've also established I believe humans are another level, so...
But we're not harming humans.
Yes.
Humans are out of the equation. We're either harming animals, so we're either eating animals or eating plants. So that distinction is the only morally relevant distinction.
Yes. I believe the benefits, in certain cases, from eating animals outweigh the moral difference between the two in, like, I guess, the hierarchy of what has moral value. So their moral value is low enough, in my opinion, that the benefit I gain from exploiting their moral value is a worthwhile trade in my eyes.
And just to confirm, that difference is based on a temporary bloodlust that you get from consuming animal flesh.
I don't understand how this makes sense either, like, because it's got to be at this level where they are so valueless that they can be reduced to a momentary sensory pleasure, yet it would still be cruel for you to slowly kill them or kill them slower than you were going to. I don't understand how you navigate that at all.
I wouldn't necessarily say how...
You did say that.
I did say that.
Yeah, you did say
Once
that.
again, bloodlust down a degree and over time, but yes, our position at the top of the global hierarchy means that we have to have a certain degree of power. I believe that it is morally justified with the moral worth of an animal being what it is, in my mind, that we consume these animals to maintain our position at the top.
Okay, so that's slightly different now, because before it was more of like an individual pursuit of like a competitiveness within a human context, but now it seems to be a little bit more of a broad abstract concept of humans need to be at the top, and if we stop eating animals and only eat plants, we're going to become lower down, and that seems what you were suggesting.
The individual portion I was speaking about myself personally.
Yeah.
I'm scared. Is this what we're meaning by the communist invasion?
Why I refrain from eating meat at certain times of the year, and while I am okay with eating meat during other times of the year,
Right.
for spiritual, religious reasons.
Sure.
As a society, I believe that we need
Oh,
people
no.
who are willing to harness and control their bloodlust, so that as a society and as a, I guess, species, we remain at the top. Whether
What would happen to our species if we stopped eating animals?
I think we would end up. I mean, no disrespect.
No,
to
please,
you.
no, I'm fine. Don't worry. Don't worry about me.
I think we would end up softer, weaker, and other nations that still consumed meat would overtake the United States because they can harness something very primal and very dangerous that we've lost the ability to harness.
So just maybe this is where we'll end it. So just to summarize, the reason that Americans should eat meat is to try and stop China from invading America, because if Americans were vegans, they would be too weak to stop a communist invasion.
Well, I'm all for the Red Scare, but in a sense, yes.
Oh my god.
There are plenty of. I'm not trying to make a slight on vegans.
Oh, please, no, don't worry.
There's a bunch of jokes and memes out there, but I do believe that we need a society that eats meat so that we can still harness some of the primal rage and power to protect ourselves.
Let's leave it there, Vladimir. I appreciate the conversation. I just want to end with...
Why do you need rage and power, like, to protect? Like, what do you mean rage? I was like, I can understand power to protect, but rage? What? Don't they say that when you are trying to protect yourself that you don't want to get angry? Like, in fights, you don't want to get angry? Like, because you want to have a level head so that you can protect yourself better? Oh, man. Oh.
one final point.
Oh,
Obviously,
God.
I find that conversation to be very fascinating, very interesting, and I have to hand it to you. That is an argument that I've never heard before, so credit where credit's due. It was a very unique argument. Yeah, you're more than welcome, Vladimir. So, but I do think, I just want to kind of put it into a tangible term.
You're more than welcome.
I don't think that is a concern you have to worry about. I would like to think that by being in a vegan society, what we would be is a bit more compassionate, maybe a little bit more aware of the harm that we cause. But I also think that vegans can protect themselves in times of necessity. If someone was to try and harm them, they would step in and try and protect themselves. They wouldn't roll over because they're no longer trying to cause or maximize the harm that they cause. So I think in the context of what you're describing, I don't think Americans are suddenly going to roll over to the Chinese simply because they're vegan. But what I think will happen is it could encourage us as a society to start to view the impact that we have and understand that actually if we have an option to reduce suffering, then morally speaking, that would be the preferable option to take. That's what I think. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. Have a great day, and best of luck for engineering.
Pleasure. Wow. Yikes. My God. That was terrible. That was absolutely not right.